Singing star Karen Carpenter died today of an apparent heart attack at the age of 32. In the past, she had suffered from the weight loss condition known as anorexia nervosa.
What happens when one legend speaks about another? Agnetha Fältskog of ABBA has finally broken her silence on Karen Carpenter, the voice behind the Carpenters' timeless hits. In this rare moment, Agnetha reflects on Karen's incredible talent and legacy. What did she really think about Karen's impact on music? Let's find out. The sound of a life that felt unheard. Karen Carpenter is often praised as one of the most remarkable female vocalists in music history, but the beauty of her voice hides the weight of a painful life. When she and her brother Richard found fame, they became a global sensation. Their harmonies were flawless, their image polished. But behind the spotlight, Karen's world was falling apart. Instead of gaining strength from success, Karen faced a growing sense of isolation. She struggled with her mental health, her body image, and the pressure of being in the public eye. Her family, especially when she needed them most, seemed more distant than ever. Her bond with Richard was strong musically, but emotionally, she carried more than she could handle. Karen was born on March 2, 1950, in New Haven, Connecticut. Richard had been born 4 years earlier. Their parents, Agnes and Harold Carpenter, kept a home where music played constantly, but emotional warmth was harder to find. Agnes made it clear that Richard was the favored child, and Karen grew up knowing it. Her mother didn't hide her preferences, and that left Karen feeling left out even in her own home. Music brought some comfort. Their father had a wide collection that exposed them to everything from classical to soul. Harold supported their artistic development, encouraging lessons and practice. Richard, who showed early talent, began with the accordion and quickly moved to piano, where he flourished. Karen didn't show interest in performing until she was a teenager. At first, she just liked listening, but even then, she was always close to Richard, following him to practices, watching his every move, absorbing the rhythm of his world. Karen and Richard were close growing up, but like most siblings, they had their moments of conflict. Outside of their shared love for music, Karen enjoyed simple things, especially playing baseball with the neighborhood kids. She was often picked for teams before Richard, and that didn't sit well with him. When Richard complained, their mother Agnes sided with him. She often scolded Karen for upsetting her brother, which made Karen feel like she had done something wrong, just by being good at something. These early moments at home shaped how Karen saw herself and influenced her confidence for years to come. By the time Richard was 16, his piano skills had become impressive. Their parents were sure he had a future in music and wanted to help him succeed. In 1963, the family left their life in Connecticut and moved to Southern California, hoping to get closer to the heart of the music industry. Karen didn't want to leave her friends behind, but the decision wasn't really about her. Her parents were focused on Richard's future, and Karen just followed. In California, Richard started performing in clubs. He was sometimes underage, but still managed to get gigs. Karen wasn't involved at first. She only joined her school's marching band to get out of gym class. But that's where she discovered something unexpected. She loved playing the drums. By 1965, Richard had formed the Richard Carpenter Trio, including Karen on drums and a friend named Wes Jacobs on bass. Karen asked if her name could be part of the band's title, but Richard turned her down. The trio performed around the local scene, playing jazz covers and original songs. In 1966, they won a well-known band contest, which led to a short-lived deal with RCA Records. But the label didn't think their sound fit the direction of the mainstream music industry, which was leaning more toward rock. The contract ended, and so did the trio. Still determined, Richard formed a new band called Spectrum. This time, the focus shifted more toward vocal harmonies. The group didn't get the breakthrough they were hoping for, but something important came out of the effort. Richard began to notice that Karen's voice stood out. Her singing had a calm strength to it, a kind of warmth and honesty that audiences connected with. Richard believed this could be their turning point. He wanted Karen to step forward as the lead vocalist, a voice that changed everything. In early 1969, things started to shift for Karen and Richard. A friend passed along one of their demo tapes to a record label, and it landed in the hands of Herb Alpert, the famous trumpeter and co-founder of A&M Records. The moment he heard Karen's voice, he knew they had something different. He didn't hesitate to offer them a contract. Karen was only 19 at the time and still a minor, so her parents had to co-sign the agreement. It was a moment that would change both of their lives. Their debut album, Offering, was released on October 9, 1969. At that point, Richard still sang most of the lead vocals. Despite their hopes, the album didn't attract much attention. Many people at A&M Records doubted their potential and wanted to drop them. But Herb Alpert wasn't ready to give up. He had faith in their talent and pushed to give them another chance. Alpert, who was married to singer Lonnie Hall, suggested they try recording Close to You, a song that had already been attempted by several artists, including Dionne Warwick and Dusty Springfield. None of those versions had caught on. Karen and Richard weren't sure about it at first, but eventually agreed. This time, Karen took the lead as the sole vocalist. The song was released on May 14, 1970, and the response was immediate. It became a massive hit. Within 6 months, it had sold over 3 million copies. On July 25th, Close to You reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving the Carpenters their first chart-topping success. Later that year, Richard watched a wedding-themed TV commercial that used a soft melody in the background. Something about it stayed with him. He tracked it down and turned it into a full-length song. That became We've Only Just Begun, which they released on August 21, 1970, just 3 months after Close to You. The song climbed to #2 on the Billboard charts, only behind Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel. It sold over 1 million copies and won the Carpenters 2 Grammy Awards in 1971. With only 2 singles, they had gone from unknowns to international stars. Both songs were featured on their second album, Close to You, which came out in late August 1970. The album was a commercial success. Then, in November, Richard went to see the film Lovers and Other Strangers. During one scene, he heard a soft ballad by the band Bread. He felt it had potential and thought it could be something special in Karen's voice. He was right. They recorded For All We Know and released it on January 15, 1971. It became another major success, reaching #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and selling millions more copies. Just a few months later, on April 23, the Carpenters released Rainy Days and Mondays. It reached #2 on the charts. Soon after, they followed it with Superstar, which also climbed to #2. These songs were included in their third album, Carpenters, released on May 14, 1971. With each release, they were solidifying their place in pop music history. The fourth album was the first to feature what would become the classic Carpenters logo. Karen's voice was now the heart of their sound. But on stage, she remained mostly behind the drums, while Richard and the band stood out front. This arrangement drew criticism, and by early 1971, there was growing pressure for Karen to move forward and take center stage. Richard was hesitant, but eventually agreed. From then on, Karen began performing at the front during all their shows. Her presence on stage quickly gained attention, and her popularity began to surpass her brother's. On June 19, 1972, the Carpenters released Goodbye to Love. It became a major hit, reaching #7 on the Billboard Hot 100. What made the song stand out was Richard's decision to include a fuzz guitar solo, something unusual in soft pop That bold choice helped shape what would later be known as the power ballad. Success and Struggles. Their fourth album, A Song for You, was released in June 1972. Many tracks on the album became fan favorites and further strengthened their place in the music world. But while the music was thriving, Karen was quietly going through something serious. By 1974, her weight had dropped sharply. She was taking large amounts of laxatives and secretly hiding food instead of eating. At that point, she weighed only 99 pounds. She was known for being strong-minded and often encouraged others to face their problems directly. She was the one who insisted that Richard seek help for his addiction. But when it came to her own health, she avoided acknowledging that something was wrong. She was dealing with anorexia nervosa, an illness that most people, including doctors, didn't fully understand back then. As her condition worsened, she started layering her clothes to hide her shrinking figure. Even so, the physical changes were becoming more obvious. Despite her declining health, she and Richard kept working. Their sixth album, Horizon, was released on June 6, 1975. It featured Please, Mr. Postman, which reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and #2 in the UK. Another standout track, Only Yesterday, also did well, climbing to #4. As time passed, the Carpenters' success began to slow down. Their seventh album, A Kind of Hush, was released on June 11, 1976. Although it included well-received tracks like There's a Kind of Hush and I Need to Be in Love, the album didn't perform as well as the previous ones. By 1979, Richard finally decided to address his issues with addiction and entered a treatment program. While he was away, Karen took the opportunity to pursue a project she had dreamed of for years: a solo album. She recorded 12 tracks with a livelier, more modern sound, experimenting with styles like disco that pushed her voice in new directions. She felt excited and proud of the result. When she shared the album with Richard, his reaction was distant. The record label also showed little interest. They decided not to release it. The rejection devastated her. She felt like she had finally done something for herself, only to be dismissed. Even Quincy Jones, one of the most respected producers in the industry, argued that the album had real potential. But no one listened. Richard's response went beyond disapproval, as it came from a place of jealousy. For the first time, Karen had succeeded on her own, and he wasn't part of it. The album remained unreleased until 1996, 13 years after her death, when Richard finally allowed it to be shared with the world. Karen's personal life wasn't any easier. She dated several well-known men: Mike Curb, Tony Danza, Terry Ellis, Mark Harmon, Steve Martin, and Alan Osmond. But none of those relationships lasted. In public, she often said that her career didn't leave room for marriage. Privately, though, she confided in her friend Olivia Newton-John that she wanted a family, children, and a stable home. In the early 1980s, she met a real estate broker named Thomas James Burris. He was 9 years older than her and approached her at a restaurant. He was polite, well-dressed, and carried himself with confidence. What Karen didn't know was that he was bankrupt and saw her as a solution to his financial problems. Her desire for love and connection left her open to someone like Burris. He had already left his wife when he began seeing Karen. Within a few months, he proposed. Karen accepted, hoping she was finally building the life she had always wanted. Their wedding was scheduled for August 31, 1980, at the Crystal Room of the Beverly Hills Hotel. But just days before the ceremony, Burris admitted that he had undergone a vasectomy and couldn't have children. Karen was heartbroken. She wanted to cancel everything, but her mother, Agnes, insisted they go through with it. The guests had already made travel plans. The invitations had been sent. Karen had spent her entire life trying to earn her mother's approval. Once again, she put her own happiness aside for it. Karen went ahead with the wedding, hoping things might still work out. But instead of finding comfort and love, she found herself stuck in a situation that quickly turned toxic. Thomas Burris spent her money on expensive things while treating her with cruelty. He controlled her every move, criticized her constantly, and slowly broke her down emotionally. Less than a year later, Karen reached her limit and filed for divorce. At the same time, her health was getting worse. Her efforts to lose weight had become dangerously intense. She was taking as many as 90 laxatives each night and using thyroid medication to increase her metabolism, even though her thyroid was completely normal. Her friends were alarmed and tried to step in, but Karen's parents brushed off their concerns. They insisted she was fine and saw her extreme dieting as something private that didn't need outside attention. A brief meeting of icons. In 1978, two of pop music's most recognized voices briefly crossed paths. Karen Carpenter met Agnetha Fältskog from ABBA while filming the popular TV program Star Parade in Germany. Though the meeting was short, it left a strong impression on Agnetha. She later remembered being struck by the way Karen sang. At that time, ABBA was at the height of its fame, topping charts across the world with songs like Take a Chance on Me and The Name of the Game. The Carpenters, although already past their early peak, were still widely popular. Despite her struggles, Karen continued to perform. On that Star Parade episode, which aired on May 11, 1978, she sang Top of the World and Sweet Sweet Smile, both showcasing the soft and sincere quality of her voice. Agnetha later spoke about that day, saying she could instantly tell Karen's voice was something rare and unforgettable. Backstage, the two had a brief conversation. Karen, always modest and reserved, came across as gentle and easy to talk to. Agnetha, who also had a shy side, was equally warm. Though their personalities differed, they had one thing in common. Both understood what it meant to be pushed into the spotlight at a young age. Karen had been famous since the early 1970s, while ABBA rose to fame after winning Eurovision in 1974 with Waterloo. Despite being from different parts of the world, their experiences as young women in a demanding industry connected them in a way that words probably didn't need to explain. Agnetha admired Karen's talent deeply, but something felt off. Beneath Karen's polite smile and warmth, there was a heaviness Agnetha couldn't ignore. She later admitted she sensed a quiet sadness in Karen, something that didn't match the image most fans saw. What Agnetha couldn't have known was that Karen was in the grip of a severe eating disorder. Anorexia had taken over her life, though it remained hidden from almost everyone outside her close circle. Agnetha, who would later struggle with anxiety herself, felt connected to Karen's experience. The pressures of fame, the need to appear perfect, and the emotional cost of always being in the spotlight. It all felt too familiar. When news broke that Karen had passed away in 1983, at only 32 years old, Agnetha was devastated. She said later that it was hard to understand how someone with such a rare gift could have suffered so much in silence. In 1981, Karen made a decision her parents didn't support. She traveled to New York to get help from Stephen Levenkron, a psychotherapist who specialized in eating disorders. After months of therapy, he called in her family for a session. He wanted them to understand how serious her condition was and asked them to say something simple but important, that they loved her. Her brother Richard and their father managed to say the words, but their mother, Agnes, refused. She even criticized the doctor for using her first name. That moment showed just how complicated and strained Karen's relationship with her mother had always been. By September 1982, Karen was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital, where she began receiving intravenous nutrition. The treatment helped her gain some weight, but her body had already been damaged by years of extreme dieting and purging. Her heart had become fragile, and her energy was fading. Despite everything, she pushed through those final months. On December 17, 1982, she performed one last time at the Buckley School in Sherman Oaks. Then, on February 1, 1983, she met with Richard to talk about a possible Carpenters tour. Just 2 days later, she visited her parents to finalize her divorce. The next morning, her mother found her collapsed. Karen was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Her heart had stopped. She was gone. Doctors later found that Karen had been using ipecac syrup, a medicine meant to induce vomiting. She didn't realize how dangerous it was. Over time, it had quietly worn down her heart muscle, leading to cardiac arrest. In 1989, 6 years after her death, CBS released a biopic about her life. But many parts of the real story never made it to the screen. Richard and Agnes didn't allow anything that showed Karen's emotional pain or her complicated relationship with her mother. Scenes that hinted at deeper family issues were either changed or removed. The final moment in the film showed a warm exchange between Karen and her mother, Agnes, saying she loved her, and Karen responding with love in return. But that moment never actually happened. Karen never got to hear those words from her mother. And even in her last days, what she needed most was something she never received. Karen Carpenter's voice still resonates, echoing through generations. But behind that unforgettable sound was a woman burdened by expectations that no one should bear. She gave the world her all, yet remained unseen by those who should have understood her the most. It raises a question. How many others are out there, silently carrying their own weight behind their smiles? Could things have turned out differently if we had simply listened a little more closely? Drop your comments below.